Because relationships are the single-handedly like the number one source of our happiness and the number one source of pain.
What I do when I feel I'm super angry, I let them know, whoever
Yeah.
is there in the room, and I leave the room, and then I go somewhere where I'm alone, and then I observe.
And anger is such an incredible emotion because underneath anger is always powerlessness, right? It's just not feeling in control. That's all it is.
Hi everyone, I'm Monika.
And I'm Erin.
Welcome to our podcast today.
Yes, today we are going to discuss all things relationships. So I hope
Yeah,
you're ready to get your hands dirty and get all up in there.
yeah, this is
So
such an important topic.
it is such an important topic, right? Because relationships are the single-handedly like the number one source of our happiness and the number one source of pain in our lives. So yeah, super excited to be talking about this topic today. So why don't we just kind of right out the gate, let me just start spitballing some questions at you. So what would you say, Monica, is the number one reason why relationships fail?
I love that question. And definitely that's miscommunication or no communication or
Hmm.
any form of not right communication.
Hmm.
What do you think?
I think it comes down to, yeah, two things. I think communication, absolutely. And I think the bigger topic that a lot of people don't talk about as much is a lack of vulnerability, right? To be able to really, really communicate what you're feeling internally, right? To have your internal landscape match your external words.
Yes.
I think a lot of people struggle to communicate in their relationships. Um, I also think the other piece of that communication is people going ahead and just assuming versus leaning into curiosity to really understand not just the words, but the emotions or the thought process behind the words coming from their partner. So that would be
Nice. What pro? Yes. Yes. And it all comes at the end down to communication and even boundaries, because a lot of people would say like the bigger thing is like not keeping boundaries, like not establishing my boundaries, not respecting the other person's boundaries. But this also it comes down to communications, because yes, it's great if you have your boundaries set. But if you don't communicate them in a relationship, that's just half of the way. And the other way also, if your partner doesn't communicate his boundaries or needs, there is, uh, I mean, you can guess it, but
Mhm.
that's not a good idea. Then you can
Exact
never respect it because you don't know. And that's something I like what you said also. It's just like guessing. I
exact
assume that. And that's
Mhm.
the big, big, big mistake. And that's why couples, they talk past each other.
Yes,
He says something, but what lands, what she receives, is something totally different.
exactly, exactly. It's amazing how differently each one of us processes, and so that's why, to your point, it's so fundamentally important to really embody the belief of, um, I choose to believe my partner has the best of intentions, right? Maybe their delivery is awful, right? Maybe they're in a mood and it just their tone is off. But really having that mindset of like, I'm gonna choose to have the best of intentions. And if something doesn't land well with me, I'm then not going to interpret it falsely. I'm then going to ask a follow-up question. I think that if people just embrace that and started doing that regularly, we would have a very probably much lower divorce rates, right? Because we all filter through our perception. The Sidebar note, one of the things that I do with my clients who, my couple clients who come in for couples therapy or coaching, I'll have them sit down individually and I'll give them each a piece of paper and a pencil. And so I'll say to them, okay, I want you each to draw me a picture of an elephant. I laugh a little bit and I'll scribble, down a little picture of an elephant. And at the end, when they're both done drawing this picture, I'll say, okay, now I want you to exchange pictures. And I'll ask them, do these pictures look anything like yours? Of course they don't. And I'm like, I want you to remember that the next time that you go into conflict, you do not perceive the world through the same lens as your partner. Even though maybe the environment's the same, it's all based on how you grew up, right? Your perception of like how you see the world based on all those factors growing up. So that's something I always really try and instill in my clients of like, make sure you recognize you're filtering based on your individual bias, but doesn't mean it's true for the other person. So
I
I get
love that. That's such a great idea. Yes, yes, amazing. And that's it. That's it. We have to understand for many reasons, your perspective is yours,
it.
only yours.
Yep.
Not one other person has the exactly same perspective. Now, many things, like you said, can be how we grew up and all these things, but also men and women. We just receive and process everything so differently. That's a fact.
Mm-hmm.
And this is something we have to understand. And that's a pattern I see also. Like people come to me, well, either together or one of them, and it's always the same. It's always the communication. And then they say, yes, but we communicate, we talk. Then I ask questions and questions, and then very soon they understand that, yes, they talk, but they go into the conversation already expecting the other person reacting the same way or acting the same way like they did in the past. So they come in already having a picture of the partner, how he or she behaved last
Mm-hmm.
year or whenever it was. And this is a pattern. So the same like we personally have patterns which we learn subconsciously. A relationship, two people together have patterns together. It's a relationship pattern. And the
Yep.
classic example is I just recently talked to a man who came to me because of relationship, because he wants to save his marriage. And first of all, I said, congratulations. That you are here. It's a
Yeah.
proof that you care. And that's
Amen.
the pattern, which I see in so many relationships. The woman believes he doesn't care about me, he doesn't love me anymore. And the man thinks no matter what I do, she's never happy. That's so frustrating. She's always complaining. No matter what I do, I can never satisfy her. I can never make her happy, whatever it is. And with this, without even having talked, but they have this picture in their head already, they go into the conversation, and of course, the same happens like it did before
Yeah.
because they play out the pattern. So they have to interrupt the pattern. How? Well,
Absolutely.
first of all, becoming aware, and then really understanding what you said, what you expressed before so brilliantly. It's just what you say is not what lands with
Right.
her. What she says doesn't land with him. It's like a different language, plus the picture they have in their head about the
Mhm.
other person, which has nothing to do with the other person right in this moment, but so much to do with the other person in the past.
Absolutely. I it's so true, repeating those patterns, repeating those patterns. I heard this a long time ago, I believe it was from Marissa Peer, but don't quote me on this, but it was such a light bulb moment going back to you saying men and women are so fundamentally different. I had heard Marissa say, men are wired to be admired, right? They're admired to or wired to be admired and they like praise, right? women are wired to be cherished, to be wanted, right? So there's a disconnect even right there. But when you think about it, for anybody out there who has children, or if you have a brother, and you grew up with your mother in the house, if you think about the dynamic between a mom and her son, right? She's the most influential person in that little boy's life, right? Typically, right? There's always outliers, but typically she's the most influential person. And when you look at the how a mother communicates with her little boy, does she say, it'd be really, does she assume he's going to know to do things, or does she say, son, I need you to take the trash out. Son, when you do this, it makes me angry. Son, is she very direct, or does she speak in circles? Does she speak in disguise, right? Does she just assume, or does she know? Absolutely. So when you think about it, little boys are programmed from the jump to take to take very clear instruction. And so what happens is, right, as we get older, the brain latches onto these beliefs, take them into adulthood. These little boys now hit puberty, and now they're dating and they're interacting with other women, but the game's changed because these girls, right? Again, different people, different wants, needs as little people. They're assuming, oh, well, if he liked me, he would do XYZ. If he loved me, he would do XYZ. Why would we ever think that? They were programmed to take instruction from the jump. So when I really explain this to girls, I'm like, no, if you want to have an amazing relationship, if you want certain things or need certain things, it is your responsibility to give those instructions, right? I always tell people that's like giving the keys to the kingdom, right? Give him the key. He's going to be the one to decide whether he wants to unlock that front door of the castle and walk in, right? But at least you've done your job and your needs are guaranteed to be met. And so that was such a light bulb moment for me, because I'm like, why would you expect anybody that, right? Like, yeah, I'm supposed to give clear instruction. And even if you look at the way men communicate, they're very direct. They don't beat around the bush, right?
Yes.
I just share that because that was something that, like, was such an aha moment for me, and it's been an aha moment for clients because I'm like,
And
"Oh,
that's
yep."
so important. Yes. And this also, this is all about, this is the thing. We have to understand that, like, tell your husband, your partner, what you want that he
Yeah.
does, and not make me happy, and not think make me happy. Do not assume that he knows, and the other way around also. Like, he cannot assume that she knows that you love her.
So true.
That's the thing. Like, you have, if there is more than one person, you have to communicate with language. That's the thing. That's the
Absolutely.
only way how human communication works. I'm sorry, but that's it. And you can learn it. And this is also something. Um, Again, this client who came to me like a couple of days ago, and he, I could really early see that he has a problem to express, but
Mhm.
also he was so frustrated, and he didn't even dare to say anything anymore because he was so afraid to make a mistake, to hurt his wife. So we also have to learn. That's what I told him. Well, good that you're here. Yes, we can do the work and we can do deep work. But in your case, what I recommend is, did you come to me for like 3 months and we have coaching sessions? Yes, we can also dive deep. But it's also about learning how to communicate. It's like how to do it. It's like learning a language. How do you speak to a woman? And the other way around also, how do you speak? And
Mhm.
and what I also told him is like, listen, you are in front of me and I can work with you. That's great. But in your marriage, there's more than you. There's also your wife. So what I would suggest is that she also comes in. And not necessarily together, because then we have the pattern again. But I see him and I see her. And this is what I see also in the past, it works best. And then we can also later meet the three of us. But at the beginning, it's just like I have to work with both. If I only work with one, could happen. I saw it also that it happened. I worked with another lady. Well, she's also a colleague of mine and a friend. And when we met, her marriage was like in not a good point. Now it was really, really dark. And this is also something what I want to bring up in these days. It's very popular to come then up with, yeah, your partner is a narcissist, you have to leave, and they do this, and you have to leave, and just this blaming game, and also like instead of solving, leaving. And I'm not talking about abusive, like really abusive relationships. I'm just talking about the average marriage, which just then goes a little bit to sleep, and it's and then you get frustrated and stuff like that. And in her case, it was at a really, really dark place, her relationship. And I remember she told me, yes, and everyone says I should leave him, and maybe I get a divorce, maybe I do this. And I said, listen, yes, you can, but why don't you try this before? So we worked a little bit, and I'm so happy when I talked to her like 2 weeks, it was before Christmas. She said,
Mhm.
I wanted to tell you, me and my husband, we are happier than ever before. We grew together, and you are right. It's all about communication. And
Mhm.
it's so, so beautiful to hear that. And it's because they both were willing. And I only worked with her. But
Yeah,
in her case, it worked. Well, she is also a coach. She is also a therapist. In her case, it worked because she obviously could deliver him all that in such a good way that he
yeah.
understand and he was on board and they did both the things, the work.
I love that. I love that, and you're right, it is almost like learning a new language, and I always tell people, Where are you gonna learn this?" It's not a topic they discuss in school, so, like, it's really either self-taught or not taught at all. So, another reason why a coach would be highly beneficial for anyone out there who's struggling with communication issues in relationships, and they could be romantic, they could be familial, they could be work related, but there are guides out there to help. I know something that I teach a lot of my clients. I created a communication kind of like technique specifically to deliver difficult things, right? When maybe it's, breaking up with somebody, maybe it's talking about something that's really painful to you. Maybe your spouse or your partner did something to hurt your feelings and you're just still not over it. So I'll just kind of walk you through it. But the first thing I always tell people when you go into any kind of potentially highly volatile situation is to always come out of the gate with your highest intention. Because what that does is it teaches people, okay, like I can put my weapons down. This isn't a gunfight, right? I can holster my weapon. So really just saying, my only intention is I love you. You're my person. I want us to be able to communicate openly and honestly, right? Highest intention. The second thing to do is to keep it specifically about your own feelings, right? So none of the blame game, not the dirty fighting of like, you did this 45 times back in 2024, right? That's dirty fighting for anybody who's listening. That's dirty fighting. That is an emotionally immature response. So just recognize that. But somebody who says, this is my highest intention. And if I'm being completely transparent with you out of respect for that relationship, I've got to tell you that the situation that I had XYZ last night when it really hurt my feelings. I felt unseen. I felt unheard, whatever those feelings are. Because the reality is, I can't argue your feelings. Can't. That's Bible. That's your truth. Now, if you go in it from a perspective of this happened this way, right? Remember going back to the elephant story? They did not perceive this same situation the way you did. So you were going to be prepared. Be prepared. You're going to stay wrapped around the axle. You're going to stay lost in the weeds because details are arguable, feelings are not. Okay. So, highest intention, keep it about your own feelings. And then the third part of this technique this is the most pivotal part of this conversation, is to say, I don't want to jump to conclusions or make assumptions. as to what was going on for you. And left to my own devices, I'm probably going to get it wrong. So help me understand what that was about and then restate that highest intention because I genuinely love you and want us to be in an amazing place. And then shut your mouth. What this does is it gives the other person the platform to be fully seen and heard without judgment, which is what a lot of us don't do. We jump to conclusions and then we're already planning our rebuttals. So we're not really listening. Right. So when both parties feel fully seen and heard, then you're in a position where real change can actually happen. Because Monica, I know you've seen this too. People will have like probably in your own life, because I've had it happen in my own life before I learned how to communicate properly. I would get into an argument with my boyfriend at the time and it would escalate. And then one of us would be a stronger arguer, right? And so the other one would shut down. And then eventually you'd go off into your own corners and come back. I'm sorry, but we didn't resolve the actual issue. And then a couple weeks later, the same problem would pop back up. It was because both parties weren't acknowledged. So this is a really high level technique that allows both parties to feel fully seen and heard. So that's my teaching moment for the day.
That's amazing. I mean, that's so great. And I especially laugh because this is also what I always say.
Yep.
This sentence, can you please help me understand?
Mhm. Yep.
And then pause. And talking about, miscommunication, I helped a lot of people with relationships and also finding partner and all that stuff. But coming up with my own story is me and my husband in April, we know each other 20 years. So, and that's a long time. And
Yeah.
we went through deep, deep crisis.
Mm.
And it was all about miscommunication. Now I can see it because now I can also say we have never been so happy together than now because we worked. But it was a long way. When we met, we were super happy. Like, at the beginning, you're super in love and all that. And then when you go into the everyday, and then after years go by, and then,
Yeah.
things come up. And if you
Yeah.
do not communicate, that's poison for the relationship. Now, in our case, it was the classic example. My husband, he is not someone who is talking a lot about emotions or anything. He's just
Oh,
like,
yeah.
and also like what I see in a lot of men is like he is about, you tell him something and he wants to fix it.
Yes.
And that's it. And it's not about talking about emotions and just listening. Now,
Mhm.
one example, I I just love celebrating birthdays. I just love it. And it's
Yeah.
not about like getting a lot of presents and stuff, but I just love being celebrated. And I also love to celebrate someone else's birthday. He would never think about celebrating his birthday because it's just not important for him and it's boring. And why should he waste his time for that?
Mhm.
So all these years, I was always a little bit hurt because when it was my birthday, it was like something, okay, good, okay, there is a gift, and okay, now I go to my work and stuff like that. And I was really, really hurt. And I was like, wow, he doesn't care. He really doesn't care. I'm not important to him, obviously, because otherwise he would have, at least brought me flowers or whatever it is. And what I didn't know at that time, he never even thought about that. It didn't even come to his mind because he had no idea how could someone like that because
Right.
he doesn't like it.
Right.
Took a long, long time. My birthday was a couple of weeks ago, like almost a month ago. And this year, I woke up to surprises. He and my son, they made a birthday cake for me. They
Oh,
cooked lunch for me, and I was really, really celebrated. And I was so happy. I felt so loved. And I could see, and we were talking about it, my husband and me. And it was funny because he still thinks like, how can someone be happy about that? I mean, that how can someone like to celebrate it?
How did he get it? Did you tell him? How was it this was
Exactly.
different? Yeah.
Exactly. So this is what I was about to say. I just learned to communicate
Yeah.
step by step. And this is a really important lesson here also. I had to learn, and many women had to learn, if you communicate what you like and your needs, that doesn't mean that you are needy. No. That
No.
doesn't mean that you're egoistic or something else. No. It just means that you are giving your partner the possibility to make you happy. And guess what? When he wants to make you happy and you tell him how, he will be also very happy. Plus,
Exactly.
in our case, this was also, well, I learned really a lot about my communication and having all these stories and all this, I'm not enough and stuff worked on. I learned like to say what I want, what I like and what I don't like. And the good thing about that is he saw it. And now I encouraged him to tell me what he likes, what he doesn't like. And now we know. But before it was just, like you said, an assuming, I guess. And we
Yeah.
never talked about it because I thought I would be needy. And he thought, why should we talk about that? It's just waste of time. And so
It's
it's all about communication.
yeah. You bring up a really good point too, like, men are just, not all men, this is absolutely a stereotype, but a good amount of men, right, are programmed to be, the strong one, not as in touch with emotions. Again, stereotype, 100%. Um, and so it sometimes you do have to kind of lead by example. Sometimes you do have to be like, okay, but how do you feel about XYZ, right? Creating the safe space for them to also think about, okay, what do I want? What would make me happy? A lot of people are very quick to say what they don't like and what doesn't work for them, but a lot of people also haven't done the introspection to think about what does work for them and what they would like. So it's also just helping them to start thinking a little bit differently. Also I always tell clients who are working in communication, there's a card deck you can buy on Amazon. It's called the Intimacy Card Deck, and it's by Self Help or Self Love, I think. Um, but it's one of the top rated. And all it is just cards with really deep, vulnerable questions. If you just got in the habit of pulling one of those cards a day, maybe it's right before bed, maybe it's at dinner time, but just to kind of get that openness happening, like opening that valve, eventually what will happen over time is that valve is always going to be on. And that's what mean equals a really happy, healthy, fulfilled relationship. So throwing that out there.
Yeah, no, that's such a good point. And talking about, expressing emotions, I've also seen it more that men have problems doing that because they are just not used to than women. There are a lot of women also who are disconnected and cannot express their emotions. But what I see in my clients and people is more men, and I saw it also in my relationship. So that was the thing. Um, so when we had our crisis, and I said, yeah, and I feel so alone and I feel so isolated. And then it was already escalating. And then he would then say, when it was already, we were already in the fight, and do you think I feel different? And I was always so shocked. I was like, he feels alone and isolated. I had no idea. Well, what I didn't know is the right way of communicating,
Uh,
because then, of course, in the fight, I was like, so why don't you tell me? You never talk about that. This doesn't work. If you're in a fight, if your emotions are already like supercharged, it doesn't matter what you say. It will either make it worse or or won't change anything.
uh,
So if you're in the moment of a fight, you just have to stop. No matter what you don't even have to be in a fight. Whenever you are in an emotion, whenever you are like fully charged, it doesn't matter what you say. it's not a good idea that you say anything. You just wait. You just calm down. And once you're in a neutral emotional state, then you can come back and then both of you, and then you can talk about it in a calm environment, in a calm, from a calm, neutral point out. So this is what we practiced. We had to practice that. We had to, you know,
Yeah.
first of all, create the space. Oh yes, then you go for dinner or whatever it is that you can make possible, and then you talk. You don't come in like already like, and you always say this, and yeah, and you always blah blah blah. So this is what I talk about, like this pattern. It doesn't make a sense if you're in the fight that you keep on talking. It doesn't matter. You just at the
No.
same time can also just be quiet, wait, or you say now the best thing to do then once you have worked a little bit on yourself is, you know, I observe that I get triggered by what you say. So can we talk another time? Because at the moment it doesn't make sense to
Mhm.
talk. I get triggered. And it has nothing to do with you because, as we know, you get triggered because there's something explosive within yourself. Now, my husband and me, we are now in a point where we can do that. When he says something and it triggers me, I say, listen, and at the moment I'm very triggered. So it's not a good moment to continue this conversation. Let's talk later. And the other way around also goes a long way. And I see this with clients also. When we go through the program, when we work,
Yeah.
then they can come to a point where they are there. And that doesn't mean that there will never ever be a fight anymore, but not like it was. It will not be constant fighting.
Yeah. It's so true. It's hard to stop in the moment, which is exactly what you need to start training yourself to do. I know we've talked about it previously. I used to have a horrific temper because that's what I learned growing up in my household, right? When anything upsets you, you fly off the handle and scream and yell and carry on like a lunatic, right? So that was my normal. And when I was pregnant, that was the moment where I'm like, okay, my marriage is volatile. But I don't want to parent like that. So I've got to figure out how to control all of this anger, right? And anger is such an incredible emotion because underneath anger is always powerlessness, right? It's just not feeling in control. That's all it is. And so when you're feeling that emotion, the first question should be, what do I feel out of control about? Right? But going back to me and having this explosive temper, I created a trigger strategy for myself, and I've shared this with a lot of clients who also have issues with controlling themselves when they're elevated, right, in the moment. And so what I'll do is I will have them I love the fact that you say to your husband, "I feel triggered in this moment." I wasn't able to do that because when I would open my mouth, poison would come out. I just couldn't control myself. I didn't know how to because, again, where do you get taught the right way to
Wow,
handle,
so you have to learn it, yeah.
right? So something that worked for me and something I still do to this moment, and I teach my clients is if you're not evolved enough to use your words, have a nonverbal cue, which is just something to let the other person know, oh, okay, wait, I'm supposed to remember that. It's also a pattern interrupt. So my nonverbal cue is I'll do this, I'll do a timeout, and I'll shake my head, right? That lets everybody know, especially my son, very clearly that ugly mommy is circling. Ugly mommy is waiting in the ring in wings, right? So from there, I'll give myself a timeout. I will exit the room if I need to, and I will do a pattern interrupt. So I'll either count blinds, or maybe I have dots on my shirt, or I will do box breathing, or I see this in front of me, I see this to my left, to my right. I'll catalog my five senses, anything to pull me into this prefrontal cortex, because all of our big emotions are housed in our subconscious. Our reactivity is being run by your subconscious. So you want to pull into this prefrontal cortex. once you do that, a pattern interrupt, let's say surfing your 5 emotions, I taste this, I smell this, I hear this, I feel this, right? You're gonna start feeling your brain come back into balance, right? Your brain's coming back into homeostasis. And then logic can enter the building. So that's the first thing I do. I give a nonverbal cue, I exit the room, I do a pattern interrupt. And then the next thing I'll do is I'll ask myself, I have a checklist, right? First question I ask myself is, this is very real for me. Am I tired or hangry? Because I become a beast when I'm hungry, right? So that's the first question. Am I tired or hungry, right? Are my needs being met? Second question I ask myself is this a cog? No, my second question I ask myself is, regardless of this person's um, delivery, what is their overall intention? Are they my person? Are they my baby? Like, do they love me? Right? Maybe their delivery is just terrible. And then the third question I ask myself is, how am I adding to this escalation? Am I interpreting this incorrectly? And let me tell you, 99% of the time, I am. I'm personalizing, right? Cognitive distortions, that's a whole nother topic for a different day. But I'll ask myself, am I misinterpreting? And 99% of the time it is. And then the last question and the most important question is, what action do I need to take in this moment to be in alignment with my values and the highest version of myself? And that's it. That tells me everything I need. Then I'll re-enter the conversation and I'll say, I believe I might have misinterpreted what you meant by this. Help me understand.
Yeah.
Rarely an issue after that. Right. So that is a technique that has worked. And now let me tell you, I went from flying off the handle, and it doesn't happen overnight. I always tell my clients we're trying to win the war, but we're not going to win every battle. So you got to give yourself grace. But I will tell you, I don't lose my cool very often anymore. I just don't. Right. But it takes practice and intention and consistency. So, I had post-its all over.
In one one. And I love it. And of course, I mean, it was a long journey to
Oh,
get
yeah.
there where I am today. And
Yeah.
we, my husband and I, as a couple, this is what I see also. It's like, I mean, you have to unlearn the
Yeah.
bad habit, the bad
Yeah.
thing, and you have to learn the new language, the good habit. So for me also, and I also had, I was, it was not fun being around with me. I could lose my temper a lot. And my
Mhm.
husband was more the one who was leaving the room. And then I was like even more upset. Why can I not scream at him now? So,
Right.
s- but yeah, so I love what you shared, the method. So what I do when I find myself, and of course this happens. I mean, we all get angry, and that's normal because
Yes.
we are humans, and anger
Exactly.
is one emotion. So we need to feel it, and that's the point. So what I do when I feel I'm super angry, I also I let them know, whoever
Yeah.
is there in the room, and I leave the room, and then I go somewhere where I'm alone, and then I observe. I really go inside and see what's going on. And when there is anger, I do not try to make it away. I just be there. I go there wherever it is. I use somatic tracking. I see where it is, how does it feel, what sensation whatsoever. And I'm just observing it because every feeling enters your body and is in your body maximum 90 seconds. And then it leaves. Except you always pull it back with stories. You tell yourself, or you say, yes, this is because they said, and if he hadn't said this, and this is why, and he made me angry. No one makes you angry. You are angry. And then you have to just be there. You witness it, you allow it. And you don't say, I am angry, I am angry, I'm angry. When I do this, I'm sitting there, I'm observing that. I go into the feeling, go into the sensation, go into the emotion. And I say, there is anger. That's
Yeah.
a really important difference. Because when I
Ah,
say, I am angry, I own it. Don't want to own it. I want that it passes through. When I say,
exact
there is anger, then I'm just sitting with it as long as I need to. And then it will transform into something else. Plus, when I do this, always comes up what's underneath anger. And
Yeah.
what, as you said, I love what you said. There's always something underneath, and it's always a kind of pain.
Yeah.
There is no one is angry because they are an angry person. There is
Mm,
pain. There is
exactly.
something. Someone crossed the border. You crossed the border. A need not met. Something like that. But it's always like you have to look inside. And when you act out or when you continue to act out, it doesn't work. And
No.
you have to deal with that. And that was a long journey. Now I'm very happy to say that I'm not screaming around anymore. But yes, there are moments where I have to leave the room, where I sit there with any emotion that's there, allow it to be, and allow it to pass and transform and take the lesson. Because sometimes what comes also out is it's an old story.
Yeah.
Where does it come from? Well, and
Yeah.
then there comes a picture up from childhood, for example. Oh, yes, it's the same feeling like back then when I could never ever do what I wanted and I was always told and not questioning it. And there comes this frustration. Ah,
Yeah.
there you go. There you have a hint. And then you follow it and then you go there and then you clean up a little bit, and that's also a good point if um to have someone helping you with doing that, because I also, of course, have my coach and someone who helps me doing that. But you have to do the work. It won't happen overnight.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Good. Also, it's really, really important to recognize again, you've brilliantly kept, bringing up, you brought up, everything stems from, childhood, our perceptions and how we were raised. Um, but if you think about the dynamic between, especially in a romantic relationship, I always tell my couples, ego will screw you every single time. And ego's number one job is okay, when you get hit with the fear of rejection. And let's be honest, that's usually what happens is I don't feel seen. I don't feel loved enough. I don't feel this. There
Oh,
must
yeah.
be something wrong with me, right? And then what happens is ego says, okay, we're just going to look all around back and forth in our environment to find, right, validation for feeling this not enoughness. Ego will screw you every single time. And I always tell my clients the moment that you enter, especially into a marriage, you have relinquished that I. Now you're a we, right? You don't have the luxury of acting like an island anymore because now you're a team. And so it's really recognizing like when you feel armored up, when you're in conflict or high stress situation where you're armored up, that's the exact moment where you need to drop the armor, right? And to say, okay, how do we turn this ship around? And most people don't. That their ego is still running the show where they're still looking for these are all the reasons why my partner hates me. These are all the reasons why my partner doesn't love and respect me. Right? Because ego needs validation. So I just throw that out there because most people don't even recognize that. But that's ego. And ego is not your friend. Ego cannot exist in a relationship. It can't do it. Otherwise, you're putting your needs in front of the teams of the collective. So, I just throw that out there because
No, it's
just
very important. Yes. I love that you said you're a team. And then I also had another conversation with another client about relationship, and he said, "Yeah, well, relationships is all about compromises." Wrong. I mean, depends on how you see compromises. Because how I see a compromise is both of you suffer a little bit. Now, that doesn't solve anything. But where does this come from? Because we see ourselves as isolated being,
Mhm,
and the other person as an isolated something. But that doesn't a relationship doesn't work like that. You are one. I mean, yes, you are individuals, but in that case, you are one. So you have to find what's best for both and not cutting a little bit off from both. And that's where you have to go. How? Again, with communication, starting values. So what your value? You brought it up before. So what are your values? And
mhm,
what is their values? And then you have to to look at that. And so where are similarities, or where are things, or where can you, not make compromises in the sense of, okay, I will not do that, although I love it so much, but I will do that. I will not. And rather finding something that works for all of them. Like,
Yeah.
and this is real. It works like that.
Hmm.
The moment you try to cut a little bit of you and try to cut off a little bit of your partner, that won't last for long. You can do it a little bit, but not for a long time.
That's so brilliant. I actually, this is going to be a very unpopular statement, but it's mine. I own it. I'm the first to tell my clients that consistent compromise, which we've been conditioned as a society to believe that compromise is a good thing, but consistent compromise in a relationship is this number one sign of incompatibility. So if you're consistently compromising, at some point you have to recognize you're never going to get your needs met. It's not a compatible relationship. So unpopular uh, topic, but it's also true. Compromise should not, to your point, should not be glorified 24/7. You should not
Exactly.
be minimizing, shrinking, cutting off parts of yourself to appease the other person. So, yeah,
Totally agree.
uh,
Like that's the thing. So how do you do it then? Well, again, you have to really understand who, and you have to update also this. You have to understand your partner. And
yeah,
after 20 years, have to do it over and over again because we are never the same version. So we have to really understand. We have to communicate. We have to talk. And when I understand, oh, now it's very important for him to do this and that and blah, blah, blah. Okay, great. How can we, not I, how can we grow together? How can that work for both of us? Instead of how can we make compromises? How can we feel full, both of us, with
yeah,
that, knowing that? And again, it's all about communication, exploring. What does he mean? What does he want? How is it when he says that? Does this really mean? Yes, even after 20 years, you have to do that.
mhm,
Always. It never ends because this is from the beginning until the end. And the more you take time and then investigate, like really becoming a detective. What does he mean? What does trust now mean? The better you can communicate, the better your relationship. And no compromise is needed anymore.
exactly. Monica, do you know who Dr. John Gottman is? He founded with his wife the
About
Gottman Institute. Okay, then you're going to love this. So, back in 2014, I think I had the opportunity to fly out to the Orca Islands and to spend 3 days with Dr. Gottman and his wife, Julie. And he taught me, so for anyone who doesn't know, he's the number one leading relationship expert in the world. He's been featured in so many books like Outliers, Blink. And what he does is he studies relationships, and he can tell you down to a decimal point the likelihood that a couple is going to divorce. He's really quite brilliant. So I spent a few days with him, and he taught me this technique that he uses with his wife Julie, and they've been using it for their entire relationship. And I'll explain it to you really quickly because I don't think there's anything more effective. So if you're newbies to the communication game, if you just focus on this technique, you're going to be light years ahead of most people. So the first thing he does is he said, we proactively do this once a month, but it's because we're very well practiced at it. He said, initially, we did this every single week. He's like, we had like a date night on Sunday, and this is when we would do this. And he goes, but now we just do it monthly. And if something should pop up, I just look at Julie or she looks at me and we'll say kitchen table. Boom. They'll go over to the kitchen table. They know exactly what they're going to be doing. So the first thing is you would both sit down. There's 2 rules: no distractions and no interrupting. So cell phones are off, there's no music going on, no TV on, no phones, right? So no interrupting and no distractions. And so each of them will have a piece of paper and a pencil. And let's say first you're up, Monica. So you have the microphone, if you will. And so you'll say, okay, to your husband, you'll say, these are all the things that really pissed me off, hurt my feelings, made me angry, right? That you're doing, right? And so you're just going to speak your truth, whether that's 10 minutes, whether that's 2 minutes, whether that's 50 seconds. You're just going to speak your truth. His job, his only job, is to write down what he sees you, what he hears you saying. That's his only job. And there's a scientific reason for this, right? It's a pattern interrupt. When you're writing, you're in conscious brain. So if you've ever, had a conversation with somebody and they're coming out the gate and they're coming at you full guns blazing, in your brain, you're not really listening. You're forming your rebuttal. Oh, that's not true. That didn't happen. It didn't go down like that. You're not really present, which means you're not really listening. But if you're writing down what you hear the other person say, A, you can't form a rebuttal, and B, you're fully present. So his only job is to write down everything he says. When you stop talking, then his question would be, are you finished? You'll say yes or no. And then when you say yes, he'll say, this is what I heard you say. He'll read the whole list of things he captured and he'll say, did I miss anything? You'll say yes or no. Then he will start at the top line and he'll say, oh, I heard you say you felt really disrespected when I called you out in front of your mother, whatever. Then he'll say, I can imagine it made you feel this way. And he'll go to the next one. I heard you say you felt da da da. I can imagine if I was in your shoes, I'd feel this way, this way, this way. He'll do that with every single line item. He will validate and empathize, validate and empathize, validate and empathize. Truly putting your shoes on. At the end of it, the roles reverse. He'll have the microphone. Your only job is to record everything he said. When he's done, are you finished? If he says yes, okay, this is what I heard you say. Did I miss anything? No. And then you'll go line by line, validate, empathize, validate, empathize. At the end of it, if people feel fully seen and heard, nobody's escalated because we've kept you in the conscious brain, not in the subconscious brain. And now both parties are fully primed to form a solution. That is the most effective way to do conflict. If you take nothing else away, implement that, and you're just going to be able to, you're also teaching your partner, hey, you can speak to me and tell me anything and I won't escalate. It's a safe space. So that's how Dr.
Absolutely
Gottman taught.
brilliant.
Isn't that
Yes,
brilliant?
it is. And also, people will be surprised what about their partner.
Yeah.
Like, because of the miscommunication or the communication that never happens, like, really, I had no idea. And,
Yeah.
and that's the thing. I was always blaming my husband for not listening to me. And I remember when we were really at the point where I had no idea if we can make it, I said, you never listened to me. And then he said to me, do you think you have ever listened to me? And in that moment, I was asking myself, is this true? And I was really observing and going back. And then I found out that's true. I understand why he believes that I don't listen to him, because I was so fixed on the thing that he doesn't listen to me that I had no idea that he also thought that I wouldn't listen. And yes, it was true. So
Yeah.
that's also something you can learn through that method, like to see really, okay, what's going on in my partner's, perception. How do they feel?
Yeah.
And I love the idea of writing down, because yes, when we talk it, then you are already get triggered. You most likely in the program, especially if you do it just the two of you without someone coaching you.
Mm-hmm.
And there you go.
You're
And
gone.
then, yeah, this is only because and this, and if you wouldn't have said this, then I wouldn't do that, blah, 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 blah. So writing down. And if you do it the first time, I really, really recommend to have someone helping you there, because it can be tricky, and someone really outside of your life. It has to be someone who is not in either party, or not her friend, not his friend. It has to
Yeah.
be someone totally outside of their life.
Yeah. I always tell people, and again, they don't necessarily always like this, but it's true. You have the exact relationship that you put the work into. So if
Yes.
miserable and you're unhappy, that is the number one time to take an introspective moment and ask yourself, okay, well, have I been intentional with communicating? Have I been intentional with, implementing exercises like the ones that, are available to you? Have I really done the work on myself? Have I gone on that journey? If the answers are no, then again, you have the exact relationship that you deserve. Sorry to be that person, but relationships take work, but they're the greatest source of joy in our lives. The
Yes. Yeah.
number one source of joy in our lives.
Yes. And also, for those who are listening, especially women, and they now think, yes, but my partner, he would never ever do that. Well, how do you know?
Right? I was going to
How
say
do
it's
you know?
Mhm.
Because this is what I thought also. And yes, my husband is not someone who would sit down and to pull cards and do these kind of games. But I can guarantee you, you will find something that works for him
Yep.
also. And that doesn't have to sit there and put on candles and now,
Yeah.
doing like card games or I don't know what. You will find what works for both of you. And I see it with so many clients now. I saw it in my own marriage that and it works. It works. And you will find something, even if you think that your partner would never do that. You never know if you don't ask.
No, you'll never know. And also keep in mind too, for anybody who doesn't, I'm a big believer, know what your partner's love language is. That's so, so critically important. Um, because that's how you know exactly how to fill their tank every single day. Right. I'm a big believer that's part of the reason my marriage failed, my first marriage failed, is because I hadn't done any of the work. So that's number one. But also I didn't know anything about love languages. And his was physical touch, like through and through. And so I remember I told you this story, Monica, but I'll just tell it really quickly. When we were living in the Bahamas, um, I wasn't domestic. I was always, career oriented. So I find myself here I am married, pregnant, and I'm like, let me do this beautiful thing for my husband. So I sourced because, in the Bahamas, groceries are everything's coming over from cargo ships, right? So any given day you can go in and there's no milk or there's no eggs or right. So I wanted to do something really special for my husband and I really wanted to cook him like his childhood favorite meal. Again, not domestic, but I'm like, hey, I can work a Bunsen burner in chemistry class. So like how hard could cooking be, right? So I'm like reading, sourcing. Took me 3 days to get all the ingredients. I put together this beautiful dinner. I was so proud of myself. Dinner racks up. He comes in, sits down, puts his phone on the table, and he's just eating and he's not saying anything. And I'm sitting across the table like this, right? Daggers. I'm like, how do you like the food? Right. And he's like, yeah, it's great. I said, yeah. I said, that's your favorite meal, isn't it? And he said, oh, yeah, it is. He's like, did Natalie make it? Now, Natalie was my babysitter who came in 3 days a week. And I was like, no, Natalie didn't make it. Right. Ready to shove my fork in his neck. And he's like, why did Nat? He's like, you made it? I said, yeah. He goes, why'd you do that? That's not a good use of your time. I wanted to murder him. But the reality is,
Out.
love language, it's physical touch. So if I had just been waiting in the doorway with nothing on but a smile and maybe a bow, he would have been the happiest person in the whole planet, right? But I was doing acts of service. That didn't fill his cup. Didn't fill his cup. So if you know your partner's love language, like, I'm super lucky. My partner's love language is words of affirmation. So you bet your ass every single morning, I will leave him a little love note on the counter or in the bathroom mirror, or I'll send him a few texts throughout the week. But making it intentional, always fill that bucket, fill that bucket, fill that bucket, fill that bucket. So, because when people's bucket are full, they're more likely to want to open up, to want to be vulnerable, to want to be in it. So, Just leave it. I just wanted to make sure I said that because again,
And
I'm
that's
big.
amazing. And I love it now. You didn't know your ex-husband's love language. Now you know your partner's love language. How can someone know the other's love language? Guess how? Communicate.
Communicate.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And there is, before we close, there is one really, really important thing. You said before a little bit, but I really, really want to make sure that everyone gets it. Do not assume that you understand what your partner is saying. And the other thing is, do not take anything personal. It's when you say something that triggers your partner, you're not dealing with your partner in that moment, you're dealing with the program, which is most likely from childhood. And this is the thing, you cannot solve anything when you are angry, when you are in a high emotional state. You just get out, you calm down, and you talk when you're not in this state. So that's
Amen.
really, really important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, nothing good is going to happen when you're amped up. There's nothing good.
And,
Nonverbal cue, pattern interrupt, leave the room, take a break, search your senses, somatic checks, but be intentional, right? We said earlier in our one of our podcasts, the name of the game in 2025 is intentionality. So it's just being intentional. So
and gratitude.
and gratitude. Start everything with intention and everything with gratitude.
And you feel gratitude for your relationship. I can guarantee it, it's a game changer too.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being here. If you've picked up a pearl of wisdom, please drop it in the comments so we know. Um, and we can, if anyone has any topics they'd like covered, please let us know. We're excited we can
Yes.
be.
Yeah, thank you so much for listening, Erin. Thank you. It's always amazing having this hour with you. And I
Thank
can't wait to talk to you next time.
Hey, thank you. Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Right.